Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the All Things NBA from A to Z podcast. I'm Kris Pursiainen, and this show is presented, as always, by Ball is Life. I am joined today by neither of my two esteemed, venerable, lazy co-hosts. No, they have like families and stuff. Let me not do that. But I'm excited to be joined by the Lakers anointed guardian of NBA slop and, and news and opinions. Claire de Lune from The Guardian, of course. Uh, I was just waxing poetic to her before we started recording about how like there are so many people, but obviously it always, you only have time for a few who influence your own coverage or how you consume or write coverage about the league. Claire is absolutely someone whose coverage I really enjoy and who I'm not like Syndrome from The Incredibles, but like I do like strive to be like you and a lot of other professionals. So I really
Oh, sweet.
appreciate you and I thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show and talk some hoops.
Oh my God. Well, it's my pleasure, and that is so very kind. And I don't know how much I deserve that much like effusive praise, but I really appreciate it.
Well, don't worry because if I keep up with the Syndrome from The Incredibles thing, then you'll have a evil nemesis if you ever like don't do the next pod appearance or something. I'll take it like super personally and
Perfect.
all right, sweet.
Sounds great.
Have well, you can get like a Peter Griffin and the chicken thing going. So, uh with all that said, Claire, you covered the Lakers so well and you've had this I guess, intellectual tap dance with JJ Redick all season, where you kind of have already learned how to push him, lead him in the right directions a little bit to just talk ball.
Yeah.
Is there a part of you that knows that that is a man with a podcaster brain and you can exploit it?
Yeah. I mean, I think what I love, yes. And what I love about JJ is that if you ask him an interesting question, he'll give you an interesting answer. Like a lot of times, obviously, I take a lot of pride in thinking a lot about what I'm going to ask and sort of like preparing and trying to like frame questions that have multiple exit routes so that, you can have like multiple different types of answers. But a lot of people still sort of, it's like they're ready with their sword and their shield. And like, no matter how interesting or how sort of like intuitive the question is you ask them, they're going to sort of deflect it. And JJ is someone who will absolutely do that to a stupid question or to a question that he doesn't like. But if you ask something, thoughtful, insightful, whatever, he will always sort of give you that same reciprocity back. And I love that about him. And I kind of gleaned that from him really early on. And I found that he asked really good questions on his podcast on Old Man and the Three. So I feel like he has a lot of respect for the craft. And I know before he was an NBA head coach, I remember him saying like he had the best job in the world, doing color commentary for ESPN on the A team and stuff. So I think he has respect for what we do. I think he's just has a high standard, and I respect that about him.
I think he's so great with the media, maybe almost like vengefully,
Yeah.
like he's like you assholes, this is the coverage you gave me for 20 years. Like now I'm gonna turn it around.
Yeah.
But like that's class, right? Like instead
Yeah.
of put it, I mean, there was the start of the season where he was a little sassy one time. He was like not answering the Rui question.
Yeah.
But like that he
But I
was
feel like I don't know how great of a question that was. In his
no, yeah,
defense,
he was
like,
setting the tone. Like
yeah,
he was trying to be like, listen, you'll get out of this what you put into it all year,
right. 100%.
and that's lines up exactly with what you said.
Yeah.
With regard to his on court ability, I mean, this is someone who you think is a really good coach, and you're not afraid to say it
Yep.
because you can just point to so many things about this team that are different from last year. Like there's tangible change and I would say growth and improvement
For sure.
with the staff. I my nerd ass watched the whole like analytic department short film and was, enthralled. What would you say to describe what's made JJ unique, especially, looking back at your answer or the answer you got from him about the challenges and the more cushy parts of transitioning?
Yeah. I mean, I think to me, when he got hired, there was a ton of pushback because of lack of experience in coaching. He had only coached at the youth level. I'm someone, and like a hill I've always died on is I think experience is extremely overblown as a prerequisite for anything. I think having the right skill set for the job is so much more important than having experience because there are so many barriers to entry and there are so many things that can prevent someone from getting those opportunities. And to me, experience is used to sort of insulate in a broader sense in the workforce, like the sort of haves and the have-nots, the people with connections and, an inside track from people who don't have that. So it's always been a tenet, close to my heart that like experience is overblown. And so I guess with that framework, looking at him as a coaching hire, I was always super high on the hire because I do think he's super smart about X's and O's. I do think he's like fiercely competitive. He's incredibly media savvy and charismatic. And ultimately, being a head coach of an NBA team is being a CEO to some degree, is being the face of the team and kind of fielding questions, hate, whatever it may be. And then I also think he's really good with people. And I think that's really important to being a good head coach, being able to do the personnel side of things and manage egos. And I think that's something that he was, the head of his own production company, podcast company, whatever. And I knew people who worked there who said he was great to work for. So I was always really high on the hire. And I thought he seemed like he could be that kind of like Steve Kerr, like sort of in that school of just like someone who's hyper intelligent, fiercely competitive, and also like has a high level of empathy.
Yeah, and it's funny because I was just at Knicks Cavs yesterday, talking to Kenny Atkinson, and he was telling me about something he kind of stole from Steve Kerr, which was icing Mitchell Robinson between free throws with a timeout because he had like a million left, so who cared anyway? But but it was interesting to me to hear from Kenny, like, okay, he was on that, he talked about being on that Atlanta staff, talked about being with Steve, like there are things that made him a tangibly better coach that were not head coaching, but we're pretty close to it. The thing with JJ is almost like I think of that meme with like what is it, like a dog stuck inside of a store and it's like we're gonna get you out of there. Like I feel like that was like the NBA like governor landscape seeing JJ on TV every day. It was like this guy is too smart for
He's way too smart to be
yeah,
sitting
yeah.
next to Stephen A, I think is
We
what we
we
all learned.
we got to get him out of there. We got to get this man some authority on basketball decisions. Like he's way too wired. Like do you get a sense from being around him ever that he almost forgets he's not one of the guys? Because like he barely spent time away from the league. Like I kind of do get this sense he sees himself as like one of if it were college, like one of the GPA guys on the end of the bench who like just happens to have a clipboard.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing with him that I've noticed the most is that he does kind of like smile and laugh and joke off the court. And then on the court, he kind of almost has this like alter ego where he gets super serious and very like furrowed brow. And I almost think it feels like coach cosplay in a way, like coaches don't smile, coaches don't laugh. And I've noticed a few times when like something really cool happens or there's like, like a Austin to LeBron lob dunk or like Luka does something insane, I'll watch him try not to smile. Like he'll be standing there and his brow will get extra furrowed because he's like, I can't just be like, whoa, this is really cool. I have to like have my coach hat on. But I do think he's like, he takes the job really seriously. He's incredibly prepared and like kind of obsessive about it, which I think you also could have seen coming from his personality type. And I don't know if he sees himself as like one of the guys. I think he really relates to them because it wasn't that long ago that he was a player, and I think that
Yeah.
works to his benefit. But I do think he's sort of like all in on being a coach. Like I don't think he has FOMO about playing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. What is it like? Have you asked him about like, I mean, obviously everyone's asked him at some point throughout the season about coaching former teammates, like younger guys, but what is there something you sense that he does to kind of like almost remind himself like I'm in charge, like there's no one above me on this coaching staff chart, like this is, or do you think he's just stepped right into like I got this?
I think he's kind of stepped right in. I mean, I think
Yeah.
there's a certain level of delusional confidence you have to be that level of professional athlete. And I think that lends itself to getting rid of like whatever imposter syndrome you might have in your first year on this job. I also think he's someone who's very collaborative with his assistant coaching staff, and he leans on, that analytics team, and he leans on his assistant coaches. He has Nate McMillan and Scott Brooks, who are both former head coaches in the NBA, longtime head coaches. So he's not afraid to sort of like be really collaborative and lean on them, and it's definitely not like a dictatorship in any way. So I think he sees like every time he talks about the coaching, he talks about like our staff, our team, whatever. And it's always, I think he thinks of it as kind of a group project, which maybe helps with that.
Yeah, no, it's he's cool. Like I get the sense that
Love
he's
JJ.
he's like from a selfish like media perspective, like you're never gonna go into that other room at the Garden worrying like, ah, that this is gonna be a tough, it's gonna be like pulling teeth today. Like if
Yeah,
you have something to ask, you'll get an answer.
for sure.
On the Lakers in general, the big story obviously this week was Luka Doncic and his return to Dallas.
Yep.
Ca- Just what words even begin to describe that
That was
moment?
wild.
Like I tweeted about it and I said, Luka still crying 2 minutes into the game after scoring, and
Yeah.
not two
While
minutes,
scoring
not like 2 minutes into the game, like 2 minutes went by on your watch, like 2 minutes on the clock above
in
the
game time.
basket,
Yeah.
which we know is 4 hours in real life because
Yeah.
and he's still crying. And like the word I used was visceral. Like that was
Hmm.
so raw. That was so
Yeah,
visceral. But it also to me presented very upfrontly this concept of price optimization in our world right now, like or cost optimization or profit optimization is like not coming for everything. It's not like billionaires and people are coming for it using that as their tool, but like is that emotion like that's our resistance, I feel like, as humans, like that it's just like
yeah,
showing that we feel things. Like there's no way that they're as confident in Dallas about that trade now as they were before, no matter what they spin it as
for
after
sure.
that night and that fan reaction.
I think that's such a good point about sort of that as a micro exhibit of like a macro problem, which is like profits over everything. And I hadn't really thought of it that way, but I really like that as sort of a representation of that. But yeah, I kind of, I thought it was really important to show something like, one of my like guiding lights or, mission statements, I guess, as like a media person is just sort of like humanizing athletes and like leaning into like human stories and reminding people that these are human beings because I think because they do kind of superhuman things, and also because they make a lot of money and to your point about wealth inequality and stuff in this country, like people have a lot of resentment built up against people who, especially people who came from nothing and came into a lot of money, like a lot of the trajectory of a lot of NBA athletes. Like, I think people resent that because that's what they want for themselves and they don't have it. And so obviously there's like a lack of empathy there just because it's like, well, you got what I wanted. And so you don't deserve the benefit of the doubt. But I also think because they do these superhuman things with their bodies, people look at them as superhuman and thus like above feelings, above the trappings of humanity, when in reality, they're just regular people doing incredible things. And I think it's really any reminders we can get, within the sort of framework of toxic masculinity that is sports, that these guys cry and they feel things and they get their feelings hurt and you know, if you're going like last year, I thought it was important the discourse around like Damian Lillard's play contextualized within the fact that he was going through a really difficult divorce. And so just kind of those reminders that like these people go through real life stuff that does impact their on and off the court. And I thought it was, I mean, I hate it for Luka that it had to be Luka because it was really painful to watch him in so much pain. But as far as, what that demonstrates about the human experience as an athlete, like I thought it was so important that it happened on such a big stage. Like I could just picture all the, macho guys like watching this and having to reckon with the fact that like clearly one of the best in his sport, is just sobbing because the emotions are just overcoming him and like having to sort of reconcile that you can be incredible at a sport and like the best of the best and also overcome with sadness and emotion in certain moments. And I just think that's like such an important thing for people to see on a stage that big. But my heart was breaking for him because that's just
Yeah.
such a real, that's a breakup, right? Like all of us, if you've lived long enough, you've gone through a painful breakup. And it doesn't matter if it's, a work breakup, a friendship breakup, or a romantic one. Like that pain is so, to your point, visceral and relatable. And like everyone can imagine, like it wasn't just a breakup, it was messy. And they like dragged his name through the mud. And it was just so brutal. And to be confronted with all of that in such a public way, like I can only imagine how difficult that was for him, honestly.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, I always think about how nobody ever talks about how all the beer, fat, hookah leaks like made Luka feel.
Feel,
That's
yeah.
not a question that I've heard somebody ask like once on a national like TV show or anything. Like, how do you think you'd feel if you were It's just like, well, he was fat, or it doesn't matter if he was smoking crack. Like, like there,
Or like he gets paid all this money and like it's
that's
like the
the
Don Draper, like that's what the money's for. And it's like, guys, money doesn't insulate you from feelings. Like I don't know in what types of plain English I have to put this. Like you can still get your feelings hurt even if you're very well compensated for your job.
anybody with a lot of money ever will be quoted at some point as being like, "Oh, but it can't buy everything." And it's like,
Right.
well, what's the not everything? Like
Yeah.
it's the human part of it, right? So I kind of brought up Luca's crying as a form of resistance with regard to like corporate authority.
Hmm.
You brought it up as a kind of resistance to the direction our world is like loudly heading in. Like
Yeah.
we were already in like a hot take economy where social media is like the market's response to a generation crying to be heard and to have an outlet. And then they get on there now and they're like, well, here's my fully baked opinion 30 minutes after an hour-long album dropped about why the
Oh
album
my God.
sucks.
As a musician, that's my pet peeve. I'm just like let me get on my like millennial soapbox for a second.
Please.
When I was growing up, I got a weekly allowance and I would save it to buy one CD a month. And because of that, there was no streaming. I'm older than dirt. And so there was no streaming, there was no Spotify, there was no anything. There wasn't even iTunes yet. And you had to live with that album because you had invested money in it and you didn't have enough money to invest in a bunch of different ones. You could buy one. And so you gave it two, three, four chances before you formed an opinion because that was the music that you had at your disposal.
Yes.
And the way we consume music is so different now. And to your point, it's very emblematic of the way we consume everything, which is just like with a certain level of entitlement and a certain lack of reverence. And it's just sort of like I just feel like things aren't like sat with and considered and processed and chewed up, and everything is like live tweeted through or whatever. And yeah, that's the thing that makes me feel the oldest, I would say, is the way we consume things and like the sort of need to have an opinion on something immediately.
I think too, to add on, like the need to have the best or to have better.
Yeah.
Like you open up TikTok, okay, you've in the 20 seconds you've seen sea lions and someone falling off their skateboard and hitting themselves in the groin, and also like a news clip of like a nation's president discussing, like there's
Yeah.
so much information. You get to the point where you're numbed to the hook of any video. Like you're like, oh,
Yeah.
I don't think I'd like what they're trying to probably talk about, so I'll just move
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
I think that happens with music. I think people get 30 seconds into a song and like there could be eight beat switches in that song. They'd have never
Yeah.
know because the
Yeah.
first one wasn't their speed, so they just skipped it. I almost can't help but think if that which is so like societally present and enabled by everything we do.
Yeah.
If that's the kind of thinking that resulted in the decision makers with the Dallas Mavericks being like, well, this video is like this creator is great, but we can find better out there, right? Somewhere, a little bit like quitting your job before having a new one lined up, but
Yeah,
just
the
like
hubris for sure.
so like moving on from Luca, right? Like
Yeah.
big, oh, this is great. We'll find better, And I think
I,
that's like a symbol of the optimal obsessed society we're in right now, where
I
like
love Luca as like an allegory for everything. Like this situation is an allegory for everything that's wrong with society because it's like yes, you have all those things. You have, our response to like toxic masculinity and how we expect people not to feel things. You have the like profit optimization, like he's not going to be worth his extension and we have to find something cheaper. You have the like everything is disposable and replaceable. We can do better. Like there's really, you should write about this. There's some meat on this bone. I love it.
this is why I saw your tweet about like I have thoughts, and I was like, oh, I have thoughts also. So
I love your
let-
thoughts. They're great.
let's bounce them back and forth. Listen, I know it is. Well, I guess March Madness is over, so I guess it's not like the busiest basketball time of the year anymore, but we're gearing up for what's tied for number one, I guess, with the offseason and with the NBA March Madness intersection in the NBA playoffs.
Yeah.
Um, the Western Conference seeding, I'm not even gonna try. I'm gonna get dizzy if I try and even ask you about it. So
It's very
we're not even
confusing.
we're not gonna step in that direction. We're gonna go to the complete other side of the map. And we're going to go to the Eastern Conference and we're going to go to the East Coast because with the playoffs approaching, uh, there is a team led by a coach who I would say the average knowledgeable NBA fan is expecting to start breaking down with injuries like right now.
Yeah.
The team is the New York Knicks. The coach is Tom Thibodeau. And it's like the minutes police being a concept is so representative of the discourse around Tom
Yeah.
Thibodeau. Mikal Bridges covered himself in gasoline, lit himself on fire, and then jumped onto a pile of matchsticks like when he made his comments about
Yeah.
the minutes. And now he says it was really just to gas up the bench. No, it wasn't. You were
No, it
trying
wasn't.
yeah. So you wrote about Tom Thibodeau, you wrote about his utilization of players and how that relates and involves to and with the workload during games. What was I don't want to spoil the article. Like people should
No,
go
I
read
can
it.
spoil it. You can
People
also
should
read it, but
people should go read it. And honestly, like pause this right now and at least go skim it if you would like, because it's great and you'll have some more context. But what inspired that? Let's start there. What made you think I'm gonna go 3,000 miles away mentally and put myself in Terrytown, New York, in a Knicks practice to figure out if I'm too tired?
Um, I guess, well, first of all, I should say that like I have been focusing a lot on the Lakers this year and I've been sort of entrenched in that, but I am technically a national writer. So I do
Right.
write stories about other teams because some people were like, oh, it's non-Lakers. And I'm like, yeah, I actually, technically write about the whole league. It's just I live in LA and this has been the story in the
I was
NBA
gonna
all
say the
year.
Lakers have had like two of the three ever biggest stories like
Yeah.
this, yeah, the last year. So
So that's that. But also I think just intellectual curiosity because I just sort of there's this, like you said, this sort of like widely accepted belief that Tom Thibodeau like ruins NBA players' careers by running them into the ground and playing them too many minutes. And I kind of started to think about it and realized that I had never seen any like proof of that. It was just all anecdotal, like hearsay. And as someone who, is like as a journalist, you're kind of like in pursuit of the truth, I guess, and to some degree. Like, I was just really curious, like, can we dig into that? And so originally, I thought this was going to be way easier than it was. I didn't think it was going to take like months of my life because I thought you could just go look up injury data. It was a collaboration with our stats and charts guy, Andrew at The Guardian, and I had worked with him on a piece last year about player longevity, and I had so much fun kind of getting into the weeds with data on that. And so I was like, surprisingly, because I'm not like a math person or anything, and I never thought of myself as like a data journalist, but it was I felt like Aaron Brockovich. Like it was so fun, like just digging into all the data. And so I wanted to do another collaboration with him. And I was like, cool, like I'll go find this injury data and then I'll send it to you and you'll synthesize it and put it all in your little charts and whatever. And it turns out what I found is that publicly available NBA injury data, they lump in injury with illness and rest. So games missed due to injury, illness, or rest, which pretty much renders it useless for this purpose because, for example, Andrew Wiggins, a former Tibbs player, missed 2 months last year because he was with his dad who was on his deathbed. And so if we lumped that in, that would skew the whole data set. So I had to go sort of searching for, is there anywhere that this data exists where it's isolated to just injury? That led me to a guy named Jeff Stotts, who's like a sports medicine expert who specializes in NBA injury. And he has like a proprietary personal database of that he's assimilated or whatever of this injury data. So it ended up being a way more long and winding road than I pictured it would be, but it was very fascinating.
Yeah, Kenny Atkinson just said yesterday, like someone asked him if this game mattered for the standings, would Donovan be playing? He's like, yes. And then after the game, he's like, it's going to be great. Playoffs are coming up. Donovan's going to be healthy. Well, he's healthy right now. And so those games being looped into that is super like, whoa, like why? You kind of get it. It kind of makes sense, but it does leave a huge like hole and void for
Yeah.
information and for trends and patterns. Your findings were roughly that the minutes police are enthusiastic and passionate, but that they may be a little misguided with their misdirecting
Yeah.
their anger. The data does not support that Tom Thibodeau runs players into the ground. It also doesn't say he extends their careers. It was pretty like very varying, like year to
It
year.
was
That's
pretty
how,
inconclusive. Like, and
yeah.
I do want to add one thing for just because I haven't gotten to talk about this article yet.
Oh,
We
cool.
ran a lot of data and like a lot of graphs, and we only included a couple in the article. But like, people were at some of the people in the comments on Twitter and stuff, and in various other places were like, oh, well, this because one of the charts we included was like games missed while under the tutelage of Tom Thibodeau. And they were like, yeah, but what about after? And we did look into that as well. And that was also, there was nothing there. So just to clarify, like we did, open every door. And from what I could see in like, it's an article in a newspaper. So I wasn't writing a book. So someone else should dig more into this than I did, who has like the time and bandwidth. But from what I could do in like a 1,500 word article or whatever, like there was no conclusive data anywhere. Post playing for Thibodeau, while playing for Thibodeau, we only looked at starters to sort of limit it to guys who would have the impactful number of minutes. We eliminated bench players entirely from the data because the issue is the guys that he relies on. And yeah, it's not that there was no injuries or that they were better served by playing under Tibbs. It's just that there was truly like no notable trends anywhere.
Yeah, I think it was a great read, if not because it confirmed a suspicion I had that there was just nothing there. But it also like I loved how you framed it. Like you did whittle it down to just taking us on that ride. So that was cool. Is there anything that missed the cut in the article that you're like, oh, I wish I could have thrown that in there, or you just threw it all in there, like that you really wanted?
The one thing I would say is the most interesting thing I found in the research was that we had this one chart. Everything we were looking for was framed, for Tibbs because that was the original sort of thesis of the article. But one of the charts we found was like tracking, Tibbs injuries like year by year versus the rest of the league. And when I looked at that, I noticed that the rest of the league was trending up like substantially over time, and Tibbs was sort of staying pretty static. There were some spikes here and there, like there was a spike for Derrick Rose, and I was like, wait, what is that line? Like that line is trending up, like unmistakably up year over year. And so I kind of dug into that towards the end of the article. I got to talk to CJ McCollum, who's the NBPA president,
Yep.
and about some of his ideas about it. And I kind of, would have loved to go further down that wormhole of like, we presented a couple of ideas of what could be causing that. And you should go back and read, Baxter Holmes, I referenced in the article. He did a piece 4 or 5 years ago, maybe even 6 years ago now, about youth, level basketball and how that could be contributing to NBA injuries.
Yeah.
And that's would be my hypothesis, but like there's a lot of things contributing. And that to me is just not to say that I didn't include what I found in the article, but I would have loved to dig deeper into that because
Right.
that's a crazy trend. Like the fact that like with load management, with all the advances in sports science and medicine and recovery, we are going up year over year in injuries in the league. So I feel like someone else should maybe write about that.
I was gonna
Like
say that
not
sounds
me.
like a part two's coming from you. Like that
It was
the
really interesting.
well, see, like you find it interesting, so write about it. I don't who am I giving you advice, but like you know what I mean? Go for it. Yeah, no, it is a thing, right? And it seems to me that like the Thibodeau starters and Jeff Teague has talked about this on his show that
Hmm.
like they're not really sprinting during practice. Like if you're playing 40 a game, you're just not having a full intensity practice.
Yeah.
That's how you're getting into game shape is whatever you do on your off days is preparation to play 40 minutes. Like
Yeah.
yeah, so we'll see. But it's so interesting about the injury thing because I feel like it's become this like fluffy pink hat that Tom Thibodeau wears everywhere, where it's like, well, how could he be a good coach wearing that ridiculous fluffy pink hat on the court? And it's like, at some point, if the data shows that there's no correlation between the quality of coaching and injuries and the style of coaching,
Hmm.
you kind of just have to stop. Like you can't do
Yeah.
the discourse about Thibodeau is so as everything is right now. We can go back to that, but like so polarized, right?
Yeah.
You're not allowed to just like think something or to not know something. Like the word mid used to mean mid, and now it
Yeah.
means bad.
Yeah.
And like anything that's decent, people are like 8 out of 10.
Yeah.
8 out of 10. If it's like good, they're like, yeah, that's a 5 stars. Like that's 10. So people have no idea anymore societally how to quantify like quality, I would say. And
Yeah.
there's too many things. There's too many things to consume. We're too numb to it. And so when there are 30 coaches in the league at a time, or this year,
Yeah. This year, 50
30,
coaches or whatever.
34 and probably two more firings to come at the rate we're
Yeah.
going at, but before game 82 tips off. But that said, like I think there's a numbness sometimes. Like I'll say right now, I'm numb to Will Hardy in the other way. Like I
Yeah.
just think he's so great. I think he's great at developing. I know from asking him questions and speaking to him at pressers that he's a coach who really just cares about doing what it takes to optimize what he has on his roster, which is like,
Yeah.
oh, that's the job. And I don't watch every Utah Jazz game. So maybe I give him more credit on a day-to-day basis than he may have coached a bad game last night and I'd be like, "Oh, but it's Hardy, it's fine."
I mean,
I
it's
think
hard because they're so clearly tanking. So it's just hard
yes,
for me to judge a coach on a team where the directive is lose, you
yeah,
know?
right. So like you kind of just become numb a little bit to the losing, and you become numb a little bit to. So with Thibodeau, I feel like people are like, okay, I have to have an opinion on him. Here's my opinion. I think he is a good coach.
Monster or whatever. Yeah.
I think he's a good coach, but he's got to play he's got to fix the minutes thing. That's like the measured take. And then a
Yeah.
lot of people like Nick fans are like, fire him right now. Like let him join Jenkins and Malone. And it's like, what, what, hello? Um, yeah, I don't know. I think there's a numbness to it. And I think that actually just looking into it allows you to evaluate who Thibodeau is as a coach. Like I do think he struggles sometime to
Yeah.
optimize his talent, but I hope
I think,
everyone go
oh,
for it.
sorry. No,
No, no,
I
no,
was
go
just
for
going
it.
to say, I think I tried to sort of be nuanced about it in the piece where I think sort of the conclusion I came to was that because injuries are trending up, it isn't really sustainable for him to be a coach that leans on his starters so much because depth is unless the injury trends change, depth is going to become increasingly important over time as injuries ramp up and you start to lose starters more often. And so in that way, I think the way he coaches is unsustainable, but not in the way people think. I think people need to kind of reframe the Tibbs thing of like it's less that there's a correlation between him and the injuries. And it's not that he's fully exonerated, but rather like the injuries are trending up. And because of that, his coaching style is less tenable because as the injuries trend up, the reliance on the starters is less sustainable. Like you need to be willing to play a deeper, roster of guys if you're going to be losing guys on a regular basis due to injury. So that's kind of the nuance there, I guess.
He is polarizing as a coach, regardless of the landscape of
Yeah.
discourse right now. So, definitely interesting. I want to ask, like, how much data about other team was it all Tibbs through a Tibbs lens, or like you did talk about, relative to other teams? Were there other coaches that stood out as
So we didn't narrow
individuals?
down other coaches, mostly just for time's sake, because
Yeah, no,
so
I
pulling
figured.
pulling back the curtain, the Andrew, the statistician that I collaborated with for this piece, he is the Guardian's like stats and charts and data guy across the Guardian, so the full newspaper. And as you can imagine, with a lot of the things that are going on globally right now, there are bigger fish to fry for him to look into the data of than like Thibodeau coaching
Yeah.
theories. So I didn't have a ton of his time allocated to me. But we mostly just looked at it was like Tibbs isolated and then the rest of the league as like one sort of amorphous thing that we were contrasting it against. It would have been interesting to look at other coaches and see like who, if there is an injury correlation anywhere else. Um, but but yeah, I was honestly sort of relieved to find that there was no correlation because I was like, I don't want to, throw dirt over anybody,
The
but I kind of just
definitive expose.
right, but I kind of just wanted to know. I just wanted to know the truth either way. But there was a part of me that was relieved to find like I wasn't going to get someone in trouble. That's as like a tender-hearted person, I was like, oh, that's kind of nice, you know?
That's sweet. I do find that Thibodeau seems to be like totally over it. Like he's just so over it to
He
the
doesn't want to
point
talk about it anymore.
he's like boomered out of it to the point, and I don't blame him. I'm not blaming
Yeah,
him. I say this just like as honestly as possible. He does seem to be at the point where he's like, no one who's questioning this stuff knows what they're talking about from a
right.
I played perspective, so who cares? And it's I honestly I'm like, dude, God bless. Like you got to protect your like peace at some point, right? Like
Yeah.
he jokes about the minutes police, he jokes about different things. Um Michael Scotto just called me. He was like, "Oh, you're not the minutes police. You're like the plus minus sergeant the other day." So maybe Thibodeau will have to deal with that next with my lineup data. But I do find that he's just sick of it.
I mean, it's
And
been like over a decade that he's been dealing with these sort of accusations that we've now found are like maybe baseless. So you can imagine that that would probably be a drag after a while.
yeah, like I said, I don't blame him. When it comes to the landscape right now with award voting coming up, my final question to you,
Sure.
tried to come up with a fun one. What is the one this person or player deserves this award that maybe you don't even fully believe it, but just like is like a dark horse of yours, or is a someone who would represent what you'd like to see that award be? Is there any, if you had the power
All the awards. I'm like, I have
if you had the
frustrations with
power
all
to
of them.
lock in one, if you had, like I said before the All-Star game, if I could lock in one All-Star from each conference, it would be Harden and Hero. Whether, just because I think they deserve it, regardless of anyone else. Are there any awards you would lock in?
Can I give two?
Yes.
Okay.
No, not
My
allowed. Yes, go.
my my first one is not gonna because I want to give a non-LeBron one because I feel like it's like such a trope for me to be like riding hard for LeBron. I just think he's incredible. And I watch him, up close all the time. And it's even more incredible when you watch it day in, day out. But LeBron should be the fifth spot on first team All NBA. I will die on that hill. He, to your point about plus minus, I am very skeptical about plus minus and lineup data just because he's had to he's had to ride out there with like the bench. Like they just trust LeBron to sort of like man the ship by himself.
Stabilize any, yeah.
And so the lineups that he's been throwing in the last few years with no other starters on the floor are like insane, quite frankly, some of the time, and he still makes it work somehow. But he has single-handedly sort of steadied the Lakers ship all year through all these different changes, through all these different iterations. They were starting D'Lo to start the year, just to refresh people's memory, and they were still the 5 seed. He's been playing at 40 years old, incredible two-way basketball. He's the reason that their defense has been so good and sustainable in a post Anthony Davis world. And he's still averaging like at 40, like almost 25, 8 and 8 again. It's just absurd. Like he's so good. And I don't think anyone of his age has ever been first team all NBA. So it would be historic as well. But I just feel like I get the Donovan Mitchell case, but I think that's really more of a team effort. Whereas on the Lakers, like LeBron is the fulcrum. He is the constant that has kept them
Yeah.
like this good all year. So that's argument one. And he's also going to be fifth on my MVP ballot. Spoiler alert. But but then also I think Ivica Zubac should be getting more love for most
Oh,
improved.
that was mine.
Really?
I wrote an
Uh
article about it and I talked to
oh,
him
that's
about it
so
for
cool.
it. So
I'll have to
that's
read it.
definitely mine. It's
Um
nerdy, it's self-indulgent. So warning in advance. But yes,
I'd love to
go
read
on.
it. He's not going to be number one, I don't think, on my most improved ballot, but he will definitely be on the ballot. He to me, he's like the functional definition of what most improved should be, like what the sort of spirit of that award is. He's been in the league for like 10 years and he's just now having his by far best season ever. He's probably the main reason why the Clippers are as good as they are. And he's like 20 and 20 is like not, it's like a regular occurrence for him. Like he's just been sensational. And part of that is that his usage rate is higher, but part of that is that he's just made huge strides on, offense and defense. So I think he's been amazing. I think he's incredibly underrated. And without him, the Clippers there's no chance they would be a playoff team without him. So he should be getting more love, I think.
Before the season, people were doing the whole like doomer gimmick of like, oh, well, Paul George left the Clippers, and
I was
guess
over
who
the
has their
Clippers.
first round pick? The Oklahoma City Thunder,
Yeah,
where they're
no.
getting Cooper Flag. And I was like, what? What do you mean
You
James
were right
Harden
and
and
I was
Kawhi
wrong
Leonard?
about the Clippers. I was super over them because I just thought, I mean, it wasn't because they lost Paul George. It was just sort of like it felt like they were sort of 1 foot in and 1 foot out from a rebuild. Like
Dead
they
in the
didn't,
water. Yeah.
yeah, they didn't fully commit to like running it back, but they didn't fully commit to tearing it down. And first of all, Ty Lue, like he's probably not going to make my coach of the year ballot, but like he absolutely deserves a look there. But also, yeah, Zubats. I mean, like he's just his growth has been incredible, and he's gone from like a really solid rotation center that any team would probably be happy to have to like one of the best centers in the NBA in
Yeah.
1 year, in like 10 years deep or whatever it is into his career. It's just absurd.
I would say like he went from any team should be happy if he was their backup, like
Right.
very happy, or if you've got the talent infrastructure, you'll be glad if he's starting. I think he's been one of the five best centers in the
For
league
sure.
this season.
It's
And if
nuts.
all NBA was still position locked, he's probably the third team guy, right?
Yeah.
Like Wemby
Yeah.
out, missed a game, right? Yeah. I mean, in the last week, Zoo has had 25, 10, no turnovers, no misses. That's the first time in NBA history. He had his first career triple double, which came along with 20 points. And then the low light of the 3 games was 2020. So like, hello, it's not just Mickey Mouse March or whatever you want to call it. Like he's been doing this all year. And
My, sorry, go ahead.
go for it.
I was just saying my most improved ballot, spoiler alert, is gonna be Dyson. Austin Reeves and Zubac in some order. I'm not sure what order
Reeves
exactly.
is a great one.
But I think they're all super deserving of the number one spot. And I think to me, I'm like, as long as all of them get some votes on some ballots, like I'll be happy. But I think people are starting to move away from the Cade argument. Cade is very improved. I wish our ballots are only 3 spots deep for all these categories. I really wish they were 5, especially Coach of the Year. It's like literally keeping me up at night who I'm going to vote for that.
Yeah.
But in this most improved and Coach of the Year have been the two hardest categories for me because there's a lot of guys who are really deserving. But yeah, those three to me are the ones that are like the spirit of the award, I guess.
I think Zoo is absolutely the spirit of the award, and if you get a chance to see my article, you'll figure out like some of the motivators behind this. He's a funny guy, like he
Yeah.
a little vindictive almost, I'll say, but to tease it, but like no, he is awesome. I also think that like what I was gonna say earlier was one final note on Zubac and this, I guess, landscape talk in general is like you're complaining about not you, proverbial you. You're complaining about the newfangled way these kids, these youths are playing basketball, and you miss the golden days and this and that.
Exhibit A.
No NBA player has taken this many hook shots in a season in years.
Yeah, he's amazing.
It's his thing. And you don't care. He's a
Yeah.
defensive center, an anchor on the Clippers. Great pun. So many headline opportunities. And he is getting better on offense to the extent where, like, he's turning in, I mean, offensive EPM, if you look at it, he's turning in his most impactful season since 2020 when he was my age now and he's now 27, 28. So like he
Yeah.
was as old as I am now the last time he was this impactful on offense, and it's because he was playing 18 minutes a game just getting his takes off in in a
Yeah,
72
he's
game
playing what, like
season.
32 minutes a game now?
It's a
Like
career high by
yeah.
4 minutes.
Yeah.
He's never played this much, and he's fouling less than he has in years. I'm basically reading the article to you at this point. His reaction when I told him that, by the way, was just nice. And, and he didn't know. But yeah, no, like he's great. He and Dyson are the point of the award. I almost give credit like okay, it gets harder to learn languages as you get older or whatever. So like I kind of use that logic to credit like the year 8, year 9, year 10 leaps. Be like, oh look, old dog did learn some new tricks. Obviously with the experience, so sorry to your point from earlier, but sure, with experience, some improvement can come empirically and whatever, but no, this is a real leap. And
Yeah.
Cade Cunningham, I think it's the Tyrese Maxey thing all over again. No one
Yep.
was watching him at
Or
the
the
end.
John Morant one most improved. Do you remember that after being the year after being the number 2 overall pick?
And Jaren was the most improved player on the team that year.
Yeah.
He was
Don't
he
even get me started.
Ja was the most improved player on his team that year. But yeah, no, you get my point, right? Like Cade, people didn't watch him at the end of last year, but they knew he was a number one pick. So
He
the
was
Pist
pretty much this good last year. Not quite this good. He's made
but
he's made
yes,
strides, but he was really good last year just on a terrible team.
it's Maxi again. So like people didn't watch the team, and now the team got better, so then it shows more, and then they're like, oh, this is growth. Everyone in the offseason was saying what? They actually put a real NBA team around Cade. They have Cade not starring on a G League team. They have an NBA roster. And then Cade looks better than ever, and they're like, wow, Cade must have really I can't
Yeah.
I can't do it. Maxi like Embiid missed a lot of time, so he got a lot of number one option reps and usage, and then boom, bam, MIP. So yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, Claire, you're the best for taking the time to come on and hop on the show,
My
especially at this time
pleasure.
of year. Go ahead and tell our listeners or viewers where they can find you. I'll link below to your social media profile of choice. I assume Twitter, but let
Yeah.
them know where they can find you now. And also, if there's any article, maybe your tips one, but any article you'd like to plug in general,
Sure. Yeah, I'm going down with the Twitter ship, unfortunately. I do also
right?
have Blue
Yeah.
Sky and Threads and all the other ones. I'm the same username everywhere, just at Claire MPLS. But yeah, you can find my work over at The Guardian. I'll be covering, I guess the Lakers as deep as they go, but also just the playoffs in general. And I did just put out that piece about Tibbs and put a lot of time into that one. If anyone wants to give it a read or a skim, as you said, skim is fine. And yeah,
At least before they listen to you talk about it, you get a little. Yeah, you can read it after, but at least get a skim in, you know.
that's
But
all.
appreciate it and go check out Claire's stuff. That's the like her stuff. I don't know if you're listening to this show, then I have some weight, and I would say that she's on this show because she's great. So, rhyming accidentally. Look at me, Claire. Gotta let you go. But thanks so much again. Go check out her article about Tom Thibodeau and the workloads of his players. And we're looking forward to your coverage throughout the playoffs.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.